afternoon, good evening, good morning. In Zimbabwe, it is no exaggeration to say that the leaders would want to take credit whenever something goes right, and they would want to blame everybody else except themselves when things are not working out well. Our situation has not been helped by us, the people, tendency to place our leaders on pedestals where we literally worship them. Whenever something goes wrong, we praise them to the high heavens. Whenever something goes wrong, we blame everybody else except the glorious leader. This has not helped. And I'm glad to hear, as you'll hear in this video clip, Mliswa finally acknowledging that problem and addressing it head on. It is completely refreshing to hear somebody say that.
You say cabinet itself has become the center of corruption. Now cabinet is headed by the president. Are you in essence saying that the president himself is corrupt?
We can no longer hide the fact that he's the number one citizen. We can no longer hide the fact that he's responsible for decisions in cabinet. We can no longer write that he is responsible for decisions at ZANU-PF. The reason why I talk about ZANU, it is the ruling party. It is the one that comes with these policies. So for us to go back to the old mantra of saying Mugabe was good, it was the people around Mugabe, those days are gone. We've got to call a spade a spade. The Excellency is in charge. He is in control. He has executive powers. He has every power to deal with any situation. Why is he not doing it? He has the right to appoint. He has the right to disappoint. He has the right to review his team. But if he's not doing that, then he is happy with his team. And ultimately, the blame is with him. And we can no longer bless it. I'm not one who's going to... That is what made Zimbabwe go wrong. Because the President Mugabe, very right. My ministers are still right. But who appoints the ministers? Who presides over cabinet? ZANU-PF, okay? It does not speak about corruption. Yes, they talk about zero tolerance on corruption and so forth. He is responsible and he must be held accountable. It's as simple as that. The former president lost power through an impeachment process because of misconduct, because of not following the constitution. And that's what we use. That motion was moved by Maridadi at first. I was seconding it. Then ZANU-PF saw it fit. Okay, whether was it factional fights to then want to move it through Honorable Mnangagwa, then seconded by Maridadi. And that's how the last president lost power because of misconduct. Because of misconduct. So to me, not only that, the vice president, then Comrade Mnangagwa, was also expelled from ZANU-PF by the Mugabe regime for misconduct. So misconduct of what? Because there are certain powers that you have, which you must exercise to get this country forward and so on.
Well, that point cannot be disputed. And I think we need to finally address that point head on. Mnangagwa is the president. He has appointed his cabinet. Corruption is rampant. And he keeps saying he will stamp out corruption, and he has failed to do so. He's responsible. And while we are still at it, we must not forget that Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections. Those elections were not free, fair, and credible. Indeed, ZANU-PF has never ever held free, fair, and credible elections in Zimbabwe since the country's independence. So talking of calling a spade, sometimes we have got to call it a bloody spade if need be. And in this particular case, we've got to admit that Mnangagwa is illegitimate. I believe history will never forgive this generation for having allowed a buffoon like Mnangagwa to occupy the highest office in the land. And in this case here, to occupy it for 45 years and counting, if we include his time in the Mugabe regime. Why not? Why shouldn't we include it? He was part of the regime. He was responsible for many of the things that happened in that regime. So for him to somehow think he can get away with pretending that he had nothing to do with it is ridiculous. He was responsible. And we must call a spade a bloody shuffle if need be. I have to say here that Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF would not have gotten away with rigged elections, at least since 2018, if MDC leaders had implemented the democratic reforms. There are some people who have argued that they had no power to do so. I think it's because they don't understand the process of implementing the reforms, or they are still stuck with the mentality that they cannot blame their glorious leader during the GNU Mugabe. The truth of the matter is, Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and his MDC friends to forget about the reforms. And they did. We can't pretend that they could not implement any reforms. Of course they could. And they should have done so. Ever since the GNU debacle, MDC leaders have participated in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed and that participating will give the ZANU-PF legitimacy. In 2023, Chamisa is the one who campaigned on the basis that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. ZANU-PF will not rig the elections. Hashtag God is in it. He even invoked the name of God. And the day after the election, he was the one to acknowledge that ZANU-PF had rigged the elections. The very thing that he said would not happen. And this is the nub of it. The 2 million Zimbabweans were conned to participate in those elections, believing the lie, idiotic lie, that Chamisa had plugged the vote rigging loopholes, are now refusing to accept that Chamisa lied. An outrage. How stupid can you be? And so Chamisa is now being left off the hook to pretend that he did nothing wrong. And now he's launching his new party, squeaky clean. And he's going to con people with the same lie that this time he's going to win the 2028 elections. They should participate. And the whole thing happens all over again. That is madness. The number one challenge this generation has is to stop this madness. On the screen, I've got a picture of former US President Harry Truman. On his desk, he had a sign that read, "The buck stops here." And he explained what he meant by that. He said in all decision making, as much as he can consult his ministers, Secretary of State, and other advisors, at the end of the day, he has got to make the decision. And if things go wrong, he takes the blame. This culture that we place our leaders on pedestals where we cannot hold them responsible for their decision is one of the main reasons why we are a failed state. And this must end. ZANU-PF is not going to do anything to reform itself out of office. That is a fundamental truth that we have got to accept. More so now that it has total control of parliament and senate and all the country's democratic institutions. Our hope lies in forcing the regime to go into an election, rig the elections, and make sure that we deny them legitimacy by refusing to keep on participating in flawed elections. SADC and the AU condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections because the process was flawed and illegal. But they could not go the next step and deny ZANU-PF legitimacy because millions of Zimbabweans had participated in those flawed elections. We cannot deny that. Why did we participate? How many times had we been warned that if we participate, we give ZANU-PF legitimacy? And we ignored that warning. Now we pay the price. 2028, we must not participate in flawed elections. We must not allow Chamisa to con his followers to participate in flawed elections. Chamisa must be held to account for what he did in 2023. He lied to the people to con them to participate in flawed elections. Why are we pretending that he's not to blame? Of course he is to blame. We need to change our political culture. We need to take the issue of holding leaders to democratic account with the seriousness and agency the matter demands. And right now, the most urgent issue is holding Chamisa to account, making sure that all those 2 million followers who were conned in 2023 to participate in flawed elections understand that Chamisa lied to them. Chamisa is a liar, and they should not allow themselves to be conned into another flawed electoral process, only to give ZANU-PF legitimacy and perpetuate the nation's suffering. That is not rocket science. It's common sense. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.